Aloha, and I'm very impressed to be here. I'm very happy to be here, and I just came last night. I'm coming from Idaho. So from Turkey, I flew to Idaho, which was part of this caravanserai program I'm at the moment doing. So from Idaho to Hawaii, and from here I'm going to go to Alaska. And then I'm going to go to Kansas City, and then Washington, a small place close to Seattle. So this is my second stop, and I'm very impressed with what I see so far, and I'm very happy to be here. I would like to thank Carol and Sangria and the Doris Duke Foundation, so I had the chance to come all this way to meet you. So I will, as Carol said, we're going to present the film tonight at 7:30. So I think if you come there, I will be happy to answer your questions. But still, you didn't have the chance to see the film, so we're going to show you some clips and the trailer of the film. And if we have the time, maybe some parts of the behind scenes. And I'm very happy to be with Willie, and happy to answer any questions if you have. And so.
Okay, thank you, Pelin, and thank you, all of you who are here. Thank you, friends and soon-to-be friends, for coming this afternoon. It's very exciting for me as a filmmaker to meet another filmmaker. In watching Pelin's work, I was very moved by the gentle wisdom that pervades her three films. It's a woman's touch given to very important and very difficult issues. And I couldn't help but think that most men would handle issues such as incest or rape or the destruction of culture and heritage and tradition, or women's rights, human rights issues, women's efforts to be equal to men. But she handles these with such sensitivity. And so you have to pay very careful attention, and you have to stay with it because they focus on character rather than a plot or a lot of action. And it is very rare for me as a filmmaker to see work such as this, because we are so into the Hollywood version of the three-act structure, and lots of action, lots of car chases and loud noises and sex and violence. But this is a very gentle approach to, as I said earlier, difficult issues. So I would suggest that we get an overview, maybe look at some of the images that Pelin has prepared for us. She could talk a little bit about that. I'll ask her some questions, and then we'll open to the audience. So, shall we do that?
Yeah, maybe we can start with the trailer of the film.
Korkmuyor musun burada yalnız?
Yok. Buraya bir iki hayvandan başka kimse uğramaz. Bunlardan da insana zarar vermez. Sen korkmuyor musun bu kadar?
Yörük kaya dinlemede normal. Harmanlı dinlemede normal. Dağlı dinlemede normal. Dipsiz göl. Dipsiz göl normal mi?
Dosyadayım. İşe girdim.
Hadi hazırsan çıkalım hadi.
Oda verdiler otogarda. Orada kalıyorum.
Nerelerdesin Nihat? Sesin çıkmıyor hiç. Sıkılmadın mı?
Yo, normal yaşıyoruz işte.
Kızım, biz senden hosteslik için anlaştık.
Rahat mı batıyor sana Seher? Rahat mı batıyor? Ne işin var senin otogarda?
Ne yapacaksın? Nereye gideceksin böyle?
Sen kulene çıksana ya.
Seher kızım.
Seher?
Dipsiz göl orada mısın? Dipsiz göl dinlemede misin? Nihat Dipsiz göl normal mi?
Dipsiz göl dinlemede normal.
Now we're going to show you some clips, 3 scenes from the film, without giving you any feedback, any clues. Spoiler, I mean.
Kadir abi bir çay versene.
Vereyim. Şu cam önündeki arkadaşa verebilir misiniz?
Kim dedi?
Cam önündeki arkadaşa.
Dedim. Afiyet olsun.
Gitmiyor musunuz sen?
Çıkarız birazdan.
Arabada yer var mı?
Yer var. Nerede ineceksin?
Fadra Camii'nin orada.
Ha, geçen yine sen inmiştin o yolda değil mi?
Evet.
Ben tanıyamadım. Oraya kadar yer var. Kuleye mi çıkıyorsun yine?
Evet.
Ne yapıyorsun orada? Çok acayip görünüyordu uzaktan.
Görünüyor mu?
Üst yoldan gittiğimizde gördüm de uzaktan. Altı taş bina değil mi? 2 katlı.
Evet.
Sen orada mı kalıyorsun?
Evet, bekçilik yapıyorum orada.
Nasıl çıkıyorsun ta oraya?
Bazen yürüyorum, bazen bizim ormancı arkadaşlar bırakıyorlar. Sen burada mı kalıyorsun?
Şimdilik.
Sayın yolcularımız, 37 KD 797 plakalı otobüsümüz 5 dakika içinde Trabzon'a doğru devam edecektir. Yolcularımızın yerlerini almaları önemli rica olunur.
Hadi gidiyoruz.
İyi misin?
Sağ ol. Ben bakarım artık başımın çaresine.
Ne yapacaksın? Tek başına mı yürüyeceksin burada?
Bir şey olmaz.
Ama bak, yüzün bembeyaz.
İyiyim ben. Bir şeyim yok.
Kanaman var. Ölüp gideceksin burada.
Öleyim. Sana ne?
Ya bir hastaneye götüreyim seni.
Yok gerek yok.
Ne yapacaksın? Nereye gideceksin böyle?
Sen kulene çıksana ya.
Bak, kulede dinlen biraz. Oradan istediğin yere gidersin. Hastam var da bizi yukarı kadar bırakır mısın?
Atlayın ama içeride eşyalar var. Açıkta oturabilir misiniz?
Otururuz.
Well, maybe I can tell a little bit about Watchtower. Pelin's the second feature, and encourage you to go and see it this evening, because I doubt very much if you will have seen a difficult subject like incest and rape handled in this way. The story, in very short form, is about 2 individuals who have secrets, and a chance encounter forces them to confront each other.
Did not hear you.
And sorry, let me go back. It's about 2 individuals who have secrets, and a chance encounter forces them to confront the ghosts of their past, and they eventually end up in the Watchtower. In that scene, you see them heading towards the Watchtower, where The girl is pregnant. I think we can tell you that much because it's resolved in a fascinating way. And the guard at the Watchtower also has a secret, and that's why he has gone to the forest, to the bush, so that other people would not be watching him, but he would be watching the forest. And other people would call in every now and then and ask him if everything was normal. And what's interesting is he always says, yes, everything is normal. I find that fascinating because it makes us wonder, what does normal mean? Because obviously nothing is normal between these two individuals. The girl is pregnant, raped by her uncle, and she's pretending that everything is normal, and so is he, right? So I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about one of the important aspects in this film, which is a young woman who is forced through her circumstance to stay with a man that she doesn't love. And I wonder if that is an issue that many women in Turkey find themselves having to battle with, a loveless relationship, a loveless marriage. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Actually, in the film, for her, there is no marriage or relationship, because if we talk about this uncle who raped her, the reason she goes to live, it's not only uncle, but with his family. We don't see that in the film, but we hear about it. She's sent to her uncle's house because they don't have enough money for the education of the girl. So it's common that you send your children to the relative's house to support them to go to school. I think this happens in other places as well, but it is quite common in Turkey, and we consider family as the most secure places, whereas many times it is not. And so I also wanted to question this idea that the bus station that she escapes from this family, from the uncle after this tragedy, she escapes and she stays temporarily, of course, in this small bus station where she works as a bus hostess. And we consider this place as a very unsafe place, whereas it is much safer than this family house. So I always question our idea about safety, about what we perceive as safe, or what we can hide behind what we call is safe. Like family is a very sacred institution. It's unquestionable, but because it's unquestionable, it becomes one of the most dangerous places. So she escaped. She could escape from this. Of course, she had to pay with a big tragedy. But with the guy from the Watchtower, she is not forced to stay with him. And it's actually these two characters are in a moment that they both, in a way, need each other. And they give very hard time to each other as well, because they watch each other. Because before they met, they have to fight their own battle of conscience alone, which we can consider easier. But when they get together and when they watch each other inside, the fight becomes much more complicated and much more violent emotionally. I mean, not physically. So she is not forced to stay with this guy. She could leave, and I don't want to tell the end of the film because it's very open to the audience. So, but of course there are many women, not in the film, but in Turkey and in many other places in the world, that they live with their husbands, even if they don't want to, for different reasons. And it doesn't have to be poor. I mean, I know a lot of very rich women who stay with their husbands, even if they are not they are not so happy. So, but in the film, we don't have a marriage or a relationship. So, we hope that she will move on.
Right. What I find interesting is that she does have, as you said, no one forces her to stay with the God, and yet she stays.
We don't know.
As far as up until the very end, she's still there, right? So I think it raises an interesting question, and perhaps in some ways is illustrative of what often happens in larger society, where women usually are not forced to stay, but through whatever reason find that, like this girl in the film who's pregnant, she's still there. And what I find fascinating is that the man himself becomes the nurturing mother, if you like. He is the caregiver. And the roles are reversed, which I find very refreshing. Here is a young woman who doesn't really care for the baby. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, because it's a baby that she didn't intend to have. It's a baby that has to be kept secret. It's a baby that is supposed to be not alive, actually, because once it is known, it's not a very good story, because she's an incest baby. So she cannot have, she has a very hard time to build a relationship with the baby, but this guy kind of pushes her to the baby and gives her much harder time, because once it becomes much more harder to leave it again. And the guy, he is nurturing the baby because he caused the death of another baby that he, in a way, catches this as an opportunity to recover himself or to pay off for what he has done, even if it is an accident. So, and he is much experienced as a father to have a baby, and then this poor girl who has never brought up a baby. So for him to have the baby alive meant to continue to his life. For her to have the baby alive was an obstacle to her life. So that's why they switch roles when they are in the Watchtower.
One of the interesting ironies is that you would think that members of a family would be interested, in this baby surviving and living. And yet, I find very interesting that, as the mother of the baby says, why would you want this baby alive? Because it's just going to perpetuate, a secret that the family would rather nobody knows about. So it raises the question of, are you set free by the truth? Are you set free by the truth? Or are you strangled by the truth? And maybe it is better, as the young woman says, for the baby to die, so that she could live a life in which she could start afresh. But the survival of the baby would always be a reminder of an incident that she would rather forget, the uncle would rather forget, everyone would rather forget. So it kind of raises, I think, issues that we often don't think about. But I'm particularly interested in this question. Maybe I can ask you this. Do you think the truth always sets us free?
If the truth will set us free, not always. It can give us a feeling of freedom, I think, that it can get your burden out of your shoulders. But it can make you a slave of this truth as well. So, depends.
Could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this story, The Watchtower?
What inspired me is the idea of this feeling of guilt, actually, that I have a lot of questions about it, and that I believe we all have in different ways for different reasons, and we all have different ways to fight over it, and we have different ways to put feeling of guilt on others, and we use it as a way of power struggle. This feeling of guilt was a big question, and still for me that it pushed me. But I didn't start with saying, "Oh, I should make a film about the feeling of guilt," because that's not me. I mean, I don't start a film with a sentence, with a theory, or with something to say or something to prove. I start with a question, I mean, mostly. So that was, I had so many questions about this guilt, so it brought me up here. And it started with just one sound I had in mind, that I was traveling a lot in the buses when I was younger in Turkey, and I still do. In the buses, we have bus hostesses, as you saw in the film. She's a hostess, like in the airplanes. And these ladies, not the one here, they have a very specific tone when they announce, saying, "Oh, our bus is going to leave in 10 minutes," no? And they have a very strange voice that is between human and inhuman, no? So this difference, is very provocative. I mean, I never forget. I mean, I've been hearing this, and no matter who is announcing, it gives the same feeling. Oh, there is a story behind that. That's for sure. This voice has a story behind it. So I imagine what would be if it was the last announcement of a woman, a hostess. So actually, that's how it started. That was the first note I wrote. And then a picture came to my mind that this woman, after making her last announcement, I saw her walking, I imagined walking her on a kind of a highway, on a remote road that you also saw here. So this picture and this sound gave me the fuel to move on. And then the guy arrived, and I went on a journey with them.
Could you tell us a little bit about the two actors? Are they well known in Turkey, or are they non-actors?
The man, he's a very well-known actor. He's a very popular, a very good actor. He acts a lot of comedies, and it's the first time, actually, the second time that you see him in a dramatic role, and he's a very good actor. And the girl, she's a theater actress, a young theater actress, and also she puts on plays on stage as a director, but it's her first experience in cinema. So she's quite new. And the rest are professional actors except one.
Now, in making the film, I was wondering whether in the exploration of, say, the theme of guilt, you came into new insights, new understandings about the nature of guilt.
If I through the film, if I got more?
Right, yes.
I would say probably yes, because I don't have a conscious experience about that. And but seeing, even if it's something imaginary, even if those characters are people I made up, seeing them real in front of me maybe gave kind of answers to my questions, because when I shoot this scene, for example, in the very end when they fight, for example, the first time and only time. So when I see their expressions on the face and how they can be, if you squeeze someone to the corner, how wildcat she can be, Yeah. And to see that in real, even if it's a fiction film, for me, was kind of an answer.
Mm-hmm. Now, if I can broaden the discussion a little bit and move on to Pelin's documentary called The Play, and it's about a group of women, grassroots women in a rural area, creating theater. You might call it Outcries of Women, in which they explore their relationships with their husbands, with men. And so it seems like an opportunity for women to be empowered, to speak out through the medium of theater. And in some ways, it's kind of reminiscent of, the Watchtower in terms of its exploration of male-female relationships and some of the challenges. But in watching the play, which I found very interesting because I know that kind of theater happens a lot of the time in rural communities in which it becomes a voice for the disempowered to make known what are the issues of concern to them. And I found that whole dynamic in some ways, representative of many other societies in the world where women are oppressed and often the husbands are out drinking and having affairs or whatever the case might be. Could you talk a little bit about the way that play was put together and your role in that? And what are some of the messages, if any, that you were hoping would be communicated to the general public?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was, those women, first of all, were really amazing. They were really powerful women. I mean, from one glance, from the first thing you see, maybe they're oppressed and they really have hard times in lives, like many of us. But once you get closer to them, and once I got to be the part of what they are doing, I mean, those illiterate women putting a theater play about their own life stories on stage, I mean, how many of us can do that? It is a really powerful, very brave woman. So it made me question our prejudices, that we don't expect illiterate or uneducated or poor women to be strong. So that, for me, that film was a big help to question this prejudice, And they really knew what could help them. They don't make money out of it or anything, but after the film, they continued to make their plays. They went to many different places, and they could show that they are acting, and this gave them an incredible trust in themselves. They relaxed, and they felt good. And I was not the one to make them do this theater, and this is what is most important. I would not make this film if I went there and told, okay, hey guys, why don't you make theater? I would never do that. And because I'm an outsider, I'm from a city, going there, telling them what is right to them, it's for me very disturbing. So I read on the newspaper a news that those women gathered themselves with their own initiative and taking help from the school principal who has means to help them, helping them to act, teach, or to write the scripts of the stories they tell. So it's all their initiative, and they did a play, and I saw it on the newspaper, and I just jumped on the bus and went there to meet them. And then when I met them, I said, what are you guys doing next? And they said, now we want to make a play about our own life stories. This is what is more important to us. I said, wow, would you let me in? Would you let me be part of your process? I mean, not only as a director, but I would love to be with you when you do that. And they said, yes, please. So I went back home, and in 3 weeks, I gathered a camera. I found a soundman, and I found some very little money, really, to start up with. And I used the camera myself, which I was so afraid at the beginning, but luckily it's good that I did, because it helped me to get close to these women. So I went there and spent 6 wonderful weeks with those women, witnessing this incredible time while from the beginning to the end, how they made this play. It's one of the most important experiences in my life, really.
What is fascinating to me, one of the fascinating things, is that the women's life stories, they tell them, and then the playwright creates a story, all right, that's informed by the experiences of these women. And then they have to act it out in front of, the community itself. And I'm sure the community could recognize, some of the stories that are being kind of recreated for them on stage. So as you said, it was, I think, a very brave thing for the women to do. And the men were there in the audience, some of them. I wonder, how did they feel about seeing themselves reacted on the whole in kind of rather negative ways.
They had very good sense of humor, really. I mean, it is really tough. I mean, your wife is acting on the stage and talking something not very nice that happens at home, and he is there, and they were kind of proud with their wives, so not big problems happened. And they even, when I made the film and I premiered it in Istanbul, and they all came with their husbands, and they are very proud. So it all went fine. They were just proud, and they just have very good sense of humor.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that would like to happen when you have that kind of theater is that it would bring about change in the community, that men would see themselves reacted in a certain way and that their behavior would change. Now, research has shown that that doesn't always happen, that it's an opportunity to vent frustration and anger and to bring out into the open issues of concern. But then after that, people go back and just carry on with their lives as normal, having vented whatever there was. What has been your experience with that? Do you think that kind of theater brings about change, or the kind of work that you do, which obviously is kind of activist in a way, in a very positive way, in a gentle way, nudging society towards betterment, towards healing? Do you think the kind of work that we do can effect change?
I think so, yes. I hope so. And the biggest change, I mean, their lives didn't change. And why should it be, change? Because they're from there. And of course, I wish now they have better means of life. But they do the same thing. But what change is inside them? What change is how they feel? And nothing can give this. I mean, no wealth can give this to them. I mean, no change in life can give this to them. But the way they feel changed drastically, I think. And but it was before the film. With the film, what the film helped, not me, that with the film, many places from all around the world got to know about these women. I mean, starting from San Sebastian to Toronto to many places in States. It's been to different festivals. In Tribeca, it got an award. It went to Morocco, to Mozambique, to Italy, France, wherever, all around the world. People got to meet those women. And maybe the audience, even if they have a very different life, I am sure they questioned about them and what they can change, or if they want to change. Is it that impossible, It was a very encouraging film, I think, on the international base. It doesn't have to be specifically for those women, because it was for all of us. I mean, I personally got to learn a lot from them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I myself, being a playwright and director, stage director, I really enjoyed that film. Let me talk a little bit about Pelin's first feature, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Now, this one is called 10 to 11 or 10 to 12?
10 to 11.
10 to 11. It's a very kind of sensitive look at culture and heritage. You might extend it to tradition, but through the metaphor of a man who is a hoarder, who is always collecting, all right? And so he's living in this apartment that's full of all these newspapers and clocks, and it seems like he likes to have two of each one, all right? And the building in which this is housed is, in the meantime, being slowly, all right, taken apart, because of new developments, and the residents are beginning to move in. The man refuses to move out of the building, this very old man, and that's basically what this focuses on. So you could read it in a literal level, or you could see it as figurative or metaphorical and illustrative of, the impact of development and resistance, and raising the issue of whether it is possible to slow down development or even to stop it altogether, as reflected in this film. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how this film is perhaps illustrative of what's going on in Turkey as far as development goes.
Well, first of all, this film, 10 to 11, it's a fiction film, but I made this film inspired from my own documentary. My very first short documentary called The Collector, where the man, I was following the man, and this man is my uncle, my real uncle. Yes, but when I was making the documentary, I knew I wanted to make the fiction anyway. I just wanted to do both. It was, for me, a way to get closer to my uncle. So, but there were many things missing when it was documentary, and it provoked me to write about him and about his life. And but it ended up to be connected to a very big issue in Istanbul that happens in Istanbul, and unfortunately all around the world. I just heard also in Hawaii, in Honolulu, about this gentrification problem, that we keep on demolishing the old buildings, and we move away those people who has been living there for years. We move them away and bring newcomers to the new buildings. So we are slowly erasing our history. So this man, a collector that collects everything in life, who values past, future, and now equally, of course, was a big fighter against that for personal reasons, but because he wanted to keep his collections. But of course, you can read it like, why do I have to something new, you know? And why do I have to have something new by demolishing my past? So it does have a lot of questioning about that issue, that we have, that the governments or politicians forced us to leave our home, which is a very sad thing.
Now here in America, we are used to people waving placards and screaming and shouting, and there's a lot of noise and protesting in big ways. Here is just an old man in his apartment refusing to move. Yeah. And every now and then someone comes knocking on the door and tells him he'd better move because everybody else is moving, and he's the only one left, and he's surrounded by the past. He's collecting. And so this is what I mean by a woman's touch, all right? Very gentle, right? And yet a very determined old man. And it's kind of tragic and sad in a way because it reminds us of all the changes that we have seen. Some obviously, you know, are wonderful, but a lot of art, a lot of history, a lot of culture has been lost. Here in the Pacific, I think about, you know, climate change, the rising sea level, and what would be lost about oral cultures should the small islands disappear. You know, a little different, but similar in terms of the loss of identity, the loss of history, the loss of culture.